Hello and welcome to Ensemble Conversations with me, Mark Kilmurry. I hope you're all well and safe. This week we are talking to the wonderful actor, John Wood. John, are you there?
Indeed. Good morning.
Good morning, how are you?
I'm fine, thanks. Fine. Welcome. I'm in a very cold Melbourne. It's been the coldest start to winter that I can remember for donkey's years. Apparently since when I was born, 1946. It's
Really, is it that
cold.
cold? Gosh.
Yeah.
It's cold here. It is, you can feel it. It's sort of that winter wind and cool mornings. But wow, that's quite incredible. There'll be snow maybe in Melbourne.
Well, not in Melbourne, but
No.
there's been snow on the mountains for sure.
Lovely. Fantastic. I love the
Are,
cold.
are you well?
Very well. How are you?
Yeah, terrific.
How's
Well,
isolation
wishing
been?
I was still working. Oh,
Yeah, there you go.
it's it's been the worst thing about the isolation has been not being able to be with my grandchildren. That's
Yes.
been extremely hard. But like with many marriages, my wife and I have been isolated from each other for about 30 years.
Right.
um,
But you could see your grandchildren quite recently, which must have been wonderful.
yes, it was fantastic.
Yeah.
They just started back at school a couple of days ago and back into footy training, which is must have been a bit of a shock to the system for my grandson Thomas, who's been sitting on the couch for 3 months playing Fortnite.
Yeah, shock
I
to the
I
system.
don't understand at all.
No. Yes, my son loves a bit of Fortnite. He's also a soccer player, so he was raring to get back. It's nice to
Yeah.
see them back on the fields and having a bit of exercise, and at least they sleep better.
Yes, well, with any luck.
Yes. Now, John, you've been in isolation, but as you've just told me, which I didn't realise, you've written this your memoirs.
Well, it's sort of a memoir. It's turned out to be something of an autobiography, which I never planned to do. I thought I'll just, write down a few bits and pieces of things that have happened and how I reacted to various events in my life and career. But
Yes.
it's turned out to be about 350 pages or something, and it's, you know, I don't know why anybody would want to read it, but there you go.
I'm sure they would. Well, you've done so much. And was it easy once you got going? Did it sort of almost, I wouldn't say write itself, but it was an easier thing to put down on the page?
It was relatively easy. There were several false starts, and I kept getting bored with the subject matter, believe it or not. Thinking, oh, it's such a tedious old man. And but we got it finished, and it's fairly amusing. And I'm actually doing the audio version, for the audio book, and the sound recorder, Scriggle, who's sitting just over there,
Hey, Gregor.
has laughed a few times,
Oh,
so
good.
the gags are working.
Oh, that's nice. An audience. That's what you need. An
Yes,
actor,
we all
writer,
need an
audience.
audience.
That's right.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
reading it out loud, John, how's that after having written it? But now you're not playing yourself, but you're reading it out loud as yourself, but it's still your words. How does that feel when you're actually recording it?
Uh, well, it's hard to say how it feels. I sort of I've sort of enjoyed it, but I'm trying to make it as conversational as possible, so that
Yes.
I'm in a conversation with whoever's listening to it. But
Yes.
it's been sometimes I wonder why I wrote such difficult words or pretended that I was knowledgeable enough to know some difficult words. And
That's right. Then
I keep stumbling over them, and
yes.
yeah.
Well, you didn't realise when you were writing them you'd have to say them out loud. That's the
No, I didn't even think of that.
that's right.
Oh.
It's like when you write emails, you can write a sort of one that you think shows the best side of you, and then you realise you don't know what the hell you're talking about. Um, so
Well, I often don't know what the hell I'm talking about.
I mean, either stick to simple. That's what I always think. Now, John, you had along with so we recently before we had this pause in theatre. We were in the middle of doing a production of David Williamson's last play and latest play, Crunch Time. It was a great piece and was doing very well and sold out, and then we had to suddenly stop. What attracted you originally to the role in Crunch Time, the role of Steve? Because he was quite an interesting character.
I'm not sure. To be honest, he's a bit of a turd, really. But
Right.
but there are things about him. He does have a lot of redeeming features, but
Yes.
the relationship he has with his wife and the two boys is quite difficult, I think, and very different to my relationships with my children and my grandchildren and my wife. But it was a fascinating experience. I've known David for a great percentage of my career. David's sort of been in the business as long as I have, and
Yes.
and I've known him and his work. Funnily enough, my brother was taught by him as a chemical engineer, and
Really? Wow.
and David was his favourite teacher when he was at Swinburne, and so I've known of David. One of the next door neighbours used to go out with him, and I've known him, for over 50 years, and I've always admired his work. And I had a great success many years ago. Over a period of about 10 years, I performed as jock in the club.
Yes. Right.
Firstly for Melbourne Theatre Company with an amazing cast, and then we did it again for Sydney Theatre Company with a cast that was really great as well. But
Yes.
different sort of actors. The Sydney Theatre Company actors, they were
Yes.
much more self-absorbed than the group that we worked with together in Melbourne. And then I did 3 different productions of it for Hit Productions as national tours, still playing jock with various other people playing the other characters. So I had a long relationship with that play, and I think the club is probably David's best and funniest play. It's just a long string of laughs. It is so comprehensive and such a great look at a footy club. And it is just funny, line after line after line, and it was a dream run for me. I was, as I said, I did it for about 10 years on and off, and
Yes, and a great character. Jock is one of the standout characters in theatre. I think he's just such a great character.
Yeah,
I was reading it recently, and you're right. It's laugh out loud, funny, and moving too. And it says such a lot. Still.
Oh yeah. It's very clever.
Yeah,
but
very
it's
clever.
very different sort of a play to Crunch Time, which is has a very serious message at its core, and
Yes.
I found, I remember one day in the rehearsal room, the first time we got round to performing the dreaded injection.
Yes.
And I was sitting there in the rehearsal room pretending to die, and I thought, I don't think I could personally ever do this. I was sitting there in the rehearsal room feeling quite dreadful, and
Yes.
and I thought, I don't think I could ever do it. But
Well, and just for those who don't know, it is about the right to choose to die and to do that yourself. And that's where Steve's dilemma, wanting his sons to give him that injection at the end, but he, in the end, has to do it, has to be helped by his wife to actually go. And it was one of those moments where everything stopped in the room, in rehearsal room, and particularly, of course, in the theatre. How, playing those roles, as you just said, John, it's difficult. It's sort of, you think about the reality of it. How do you get past that? How do you get past that block of you personally not being able to do that, but Steve, the character, having to?
I'm not sure how you do it. It's one of those things that happens from time to time when you're an actor, that you have to play characters that you don't necessarily like or have no admiration for. And I remember playing a character named Lambert LaRue in a play called Pravda by Howard Brenton and David Hare.
Yes,
and
great play.
it is a wonderful play, and LaRue is a horrible man.
Yes.
Absolutely terrible. And, you know, finding that you've got that level of coldness within you, that you can actually access it and use it on stage, is quite terrifying. It's quite unsettling to know that you do have that inside you and that you can perform it. And, you know, getting past it is quite difficult sometimes. And
yes, especially if you don't agree on any level with the character you're playing. I think you have to find the love in that character somewhere. That's what we're told. But sometimes some characters are just not redeeming at all, are they?
no, they have. Lambert had very few redeeming. Well, none at all. No redeeming features at all.
No, not at all.
Just for everybody's information, he was based on Rupert Murdoch.
Yes, yes.
And I don't know whether Rupert's got any redeeming features either.
And also, I think just the idea of it can be liberating sometimes to play those roles, because they're the sort of things you wouldn't say in life at all. But it's quite powerful and interesting to have that release on a stage where it's safe.
Yeah, well, as long as it is safe, it's
yes.
all right. But yes, you wouldn't want anybody to go away thinking that that's what you would really like.
No, that's right. Yes, I think that's why we go to the foyer afterwards and be the lovey actor, you know, and buy everybody drinks just to prove we're not
the matinee idol.
Yeah, we're not like that. Yeah, that's right. John, you've divided your time between stage and television very successfully over the years. You've recently Senior Moments, and you were the Wizard in the Wizard of Oz and Crunch Time. How has that been over the years with choosing what you do, television, stage? There must have been a few clashes and a few things that didn't work out.
There have been a lot of things that haven't worked out. It's, but you know, the amazing thing was when I was doing those series of performances in the club, I was actually doing Blue Heelers at the time, and the producers of Blue Heelers were prepared to let me go away and do those things because they realised how important the stage was for me. Wow. When I began back in 1970, all I ever wanted to do was work on stage. I had no intention or desire to work on television, and as it's worked out, I've spent half my career on TV, and it's been wonderful. Yes. You know, I've been very lucky. The three major roles that I've had on television have been sensational. Sugar in Power Without Glory, yes. Then Rafferty in Rafferty's Rules, and Tom Croydon in Blue Heelers. It's been a blessed run, really. You couldn't have had a better career.
No, amazing. And Blue Heelers, am I correct in saying you were in every single episode? Is that right? You were one of the only...
Yes, despite the fact that I was off doing the club at the same time, yes. They actually managed to get me into every single episode. That's 511, fantastic. I think it was.
Yes, right. And you wrote for it too?
Yes, I did. I wrote a lot of television over the years. There was a period back in the 70s where I thought, this is not what I want to be an actor for, you know, being bashed up and arrested by actors like John Orchie and, you know, saying one line, you know, it was not what my idea of acting was. And I thought, I'll write it. So I started writing. The first thing I wrote was an episode of The Truckies.
Right.
And which probably vanished before anybody really got to see it. But
it sounds good.
Yeah, but, you know, like real truckies hated it, of course, as real doctors hate things like Young Doctors, and actors hated things like that shocking... What was that show called that Crawford's did?
Maybe Before television. My time.
Yes, but anyway, actors
Yeah.
People never believe the TV shows that are about their profession. It's
No.
not. And anyway, I wrote several episodes of Cop Shop. I wrote about 15 episodes of Cop Shop, about 15 episodes of Prisoner, and the
Yeah.
same amount of episodes of The Sullivans, and then I wrote a few episodes of Blue Heelers. But I found it too difficult to write shows that I was actually in. I didn't really enjoy the process much.
Yes, I was going to say it must have been because you have to have a slight objective view of the whole, whereas if you're playing that regular character, it must have been quite tricky with that balance. So you don't say, close up, John Wood walks in, 3-page
No,
scene.
I never did that. And I was very conscious of trying not to write for myself, but for one of the other actors.
Of course.
Or some of the other characters.
But John, how did you know you could do it? I mean, a lot of actors, very good actors, are not necessarily writers. What started you thinking you could do that? Did you have experience of that in your childhood, or is that something you've already wanted to do?
Not really. One of my teachers at school said about an essay that I wrote that I should become a writer, but I was always much more interested in performing than writing, and But how I got into it in the first place was I wrote a play called On Your Marks, and I tried to write for 8 actors,
Right.
to give them sort of equal time on stage, instead of there being 1 or 2 leading characters and then a lot of minor parts. I tried to give everybody a fair shake, as it were.
Yeah.
And I wrote that, and we performed it at the Nimrod, and by the time it actually got on stage, it was a bit of dog's breakfast. But I was rereading the reviews recently, in terms of writing the book.
Yes.
And the reviews were much better than I remembered by.
Right. It's nice that way around.
Mind you, the reviews I had for my Hamlet never improved over the years.
No matter how many times you read them.
No.
That's right. I'm always fond of the plays that I didn't get the best reviews for. There's something about those that I quite like in terms of, I'm proud of it even though. But of course, it's always nice to get the good review with the thing. With the production, how do you go, having juggled this television stage would it changed your career in terms of being recognised? What did that do to you as an actor? And as actors, we tend to want to be solitary people when we're not working. Did that affect anything that you were doing or preparing or your day-to-day life?
Not particularly, except that you have no privacy at all, like there's, whether you're having breakfast or lunch or dinner, if you're in public, you're public property, and they come up and, you're just about to put a forkful of food into your mouth, and somebody wants to shake hands or whatever. That's very difficult, but
it's part of the job, I guess, is what
it is part of the job.
Yes,
and as I said, I had never any intention of working on television, and the big problem, I think, the biggest problem, particularly in Australia, is everybody thinks that you're a millionaire, and nothing could be further from the truth. I mean, the fact that Blue Heelers is still showing on a couple of channels on Foxtel,
yes,
we don't get any money for that. It sold into South Africa a few years ago, and South Africa is the 3rd largest English-speaking country in the world, and we didn't get paid a penny.
Right, gosh.
And but everybody thinks because American actors are so wealthy that we must be too. But American actors get paid really good residuals. They get paid every time their show is shown. So if they make the show in Melbourne, or Washington, whatever, they get paid for Washington, and then if it shows in Texas, they get paid for Texas, and then they get paid for New York, they get paid for everything, whereas
Yes.
we get paid once for, worldwide distribution
Yeah.
usually. And the worst thing about it is because everybody thinks you're a millionaire and because you won a gold Logie that they can't afford you.
Right.
You've become unaffordable, and nothing could be further from the truth.
Yeah, right. That's interesting. I didn't think about that. Yeah, yeah. You can always flog the gold Logie, of course, if it's real
If
gold.
it was real gold, it would
That'd
be
be all right.
wonderful. But
John, we
yeah.
have some viewer questions. Ken McLennan, I hope I pronounced his name right, asks if you have fond memories of working with his late uncle Bob Hornery.
Oh, Bob. Oh, man. Bob was my all-time favourite comic actor.
He's
I
very good.
mean,
Very good.
he was wonderful, and I miss him. I loved Bob. I used to drive Bob to work
Yep.
when we were working at the Nimrod. I'd pick him up in my old MG from his mother's place in
Yeah.
Randwick, and drive him to work, and then drive home, and he'd pop round to our place on the way home and have a drink and or smoke a joint occasionally, and I loved him. I just loved Bob.
Yeah, he's a very funny actor, very good, huge talent. And I'm
Massive.
surprised your MG actually got there. Did that actually make it to the? They ran well in those days, didn't they?
Well, yeah, it was a lovely old car. It was a 1955 MG TF.
Oh,
And,
beautiful.
it was fantastic. Yeah, I drove it to Sydney with everything I owned stacked up around me, and yeah, and it was our family car for quite a while after our eldest daughter Meg was born, and we would go down to Canberra to visit some friends there, and Meg would be in a baby basket behind the seats. You'd never do it today.
Those were the days, weren't they? Yeah.
Oh, they were the days.
You wouldn't be allowed to do that now. And you and Bob acted together in a few projects, is that right?
Yes. I first met him on a show called Flash Jim Vo,
Right.
which John Bell directed, and John Gayden played Flash Jim, and we played lots of other characters, and that was the first meeting with Bob. But we did a lot of shows together at the Nimrod. Chiefly, the most important one was Hamlet on Ice, written by Michael Boddy and Marcus Cooney, with additional dialogue by Ron Blair, and
Gosh.
it was sensational. It was such a big hit that it got the front cover. Kate Fitzpatrick, who played Hamlet, got the front cover of the Bulletin,
Right.
which, I don't think has ever happened before or since, that an actor has got onto the front of the Bulletin. But she played a Hamlet who'd just come back from Wittenberg after having had a sex change operation because he was madly in love with Horatio, whom I played.
Right.
And Bob played a really randy Queen Gertrude. And
It
he
sounds
was
fabulous.
so funny. It was a fabulous show.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
never been done in Melbourne, which I find extraordinary. And it's the sort of show that, like if you want a Christmas show, it'd work well at the Ensemble because it's, the Ensemble's about the same size as the original Nimrod stage, and it worked a treat. It
Yes.
was just so funny.
I'll have to remember that. I'll have a read.
Yeah, it's worth it, really.
Jackie Lewis, we sort of touched on this a bit, but Jackie Lewis wants to know if you enjoyed acting in crunch time. I guess because we touched on the nature of what you were going through as the character, perhaps how was that once you got into performance, once you were up and running, that would have changed, presumably?
It was always a bit daunting to do the moment of having the actual injection, and
Yes.
and it was the play, the character, the man was a bit difficult to play sometimes, because his cavalier attitude to his sons was I found a bit hard to play, but I loved working with all the cast. Though, God, what a group of fantastic young actors they were,
Yes,
or they
fantastic.
are.
It was a great
They are.
cast. Yeah.
And Diane Craig, I went to NIDA with, and it was just lovely to work with her again for the first time. She was in the play On Your Marks that I wrote.
Right. Wow.
But this was the first time I'd worked with her since then. So it was great to see her again and to work with her. She's wonderful.
She is. Linda Carroll wants to know, and I want to get this right, if the secret of acting is in the theatre is to make small theatre seem big and big theatres seem small. Is that the trick?
I don't know. I've never thought of it, to be quite honest.
No, me neither.
I'm just the same old ham wherever I am. But I think the big secret is if you can be as truthful as possible and share that truth with an audience, whatever the size of the audience, then it works theatrically. The other thing I was doing that we've lost because of the COVID crisis was The Wizard of Oz, which was a massive arena spectacular. We had 800 kids on stage with us and played to an audience of 6,000 to 10,000, and you still have to create the same truthfulness, whether you're playing the Wizard of Oz or the Lion or Steve in Crunch Time.
Yes, indeed, and it's making that natural is the trick. Yeah. And John, apart from your memoirs now and recording, is there, and also a bit of a virus that's going around, is there any future work that you've been thinking about or talking about coming up?
No, I haven't been thinking about it or talking about it. I've thought about the possibility of the Crunch Time doing another season next year, which I would look forward to enormously, but at the moment, there really doesn't seem to be anything happening. I read a poetic monologue the other day for a friend of mine who lives in Healesville in the Yarra Valley, which I did with Tony Gould, the jazz pianist, and that was an interesting thing to do. So there might be more of that sort of thing. But
that sounds great. That's a monologue with music, presumably then?
Yeah.
Great. Wow,
but Tony improvised, of course.
Yeah, yes, of course.
Mm.
Fantastic. John, thank you so much for taking your time to talk to us today and take time out of your reading of your memoirs and having our conversation. It's been wonderful to talk to you, and it was great working with you, and hopefully we can do it again very soon.
I hope so. Just in closing, I'd like to say how much I loved the ensemble. It's the sort of theatre that's the reason. That sort of theatre is the reason I always wanted to work in the theatre. It's absolutely, I think it's the best theatre in the country at the moment because it is so. It does rely so heavily on the people who work in it, and it's such a great community theatre, and the community that lives around the Kirribilli area. They've obviously got it well and truly in their hearts.
Yes,
and I would dearly love to come back and work there, whatever we do.
Thank you, John. We'd love to have you back in the job. So thank you so much for that.
Cheers.
And great to talk to you.
You too.
All the best, John. All the best.
Thank you.
Bye. That was the wonderful John Wood, and next week we'll be talking Everything Pinter, Harold Pinter's The Caretaker, a wonderful play, and we'll be talking to the director and the lead actor of that next week. That's Ian Sinclair and Darren Gilshannon. Thank you for joining us this morning, and we'll see you next week. Keep safe. Bye.